want to be the best possible leader you can be? Do you want to be the leader your team truly deserves? Then you are in the right place. In this podcast, we share deeply personal stories of how successful leaders are powered by their purpose and anchored in their authenticity, how they connect who they are to how they lead and translate their purpose into everyday actions in good times and bad, at crossroads and crises, how they challenge status quo and existing paradigms and do different things differently. Mindful leadership is the greatest unlock for the future of work. Join us in reimagining the leadership of the future with me, your host, Shahana Banerjee, CEO of Just Human, on a mission to humanize the future of work. In this episode, we dive into a mega dose of inspiration with Jayshree Seth, corporate scientist and chief science advocate at 3M. She holds 79 patents, is an author, TEDx speaker, poet, music producer, and is on a mission to humanize science. Jayshree, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you on our podcast.
Thank you, Shahana. Thanks so much for having me.
Your TED Talk is so inspiring, and I have to admit, it's one of my absolute favorites of all time. And so I'm really excited that our listeners get to know you better today.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. I'm going to tell my kids because they're always like, who's even going to watch this?
So let's dive right in. So tell us your story and the people, the influences, and the experiences that have shaped you into who you are today.
I grew up on the campus of an engineering college, a beautiful town in northern India. My dad was actually a professor there. It was a really wonderful place to grow up. Lots of friends, great schools, access to top-notch university facilities. A very notable thing about that was it was a very, very, very diverse community. And honestly, I didn't realize that till I was much older, and I was like, oh, not everyone grows up this way. In the block of 6 homes that we lived for quite some time, at any given time, we had 5 religions. We had a family with a special needs child. We had a family with adopted children. We had a family where a mom ran an in-home business. There were 5 different languages spoken in those 6 homes, and there were aroma of different regional cuisines floating in the air. You can't make this stuff up. And how fortunate to have grown up that way. And all the kids, we still found ways to play and interact with each other, all in, broken Hindi, the kind that broke any artificial barriers. So really those differences enriched my childhood, and it really shaped my thinking. And I only realized that as I look back, right? Another crucible experience that is also related to our town, since this was a prestigious engineering college, the oldest engineering school, all of Asia, there was a great pressure to get into that hometown college.
Right.
And for boys and girls, because you wouldn't have to leave home. And that was the important thing in the Indian contest. Most girls did not leave home before marriage. I didn't think of myself as the science and engineering type, or at least what I thought was the science and engineering type. And I was drawn to fields where I had this contextual pull of helping people, improving lives. And I just didn't see that in STEM fields. And to add to that, I didn't get in. So I didn't get into the hometown college. I went thousands of miles away to a different part of the country to get an engineering education. That also shaped me. And the reason is because I tell most people it's like going from Ireland to Portugal. Different language, different culture, different customs, different food, different social norms. And in many ways, that cocoon of my hometown sort of unraveled, because no longer was I on the campus as a child, but as a student. So that was a really crucible experience. I encountered wonderful, open-minded people, but then also there were those who really harbored resentment against girls in engineering because you're wasting a man's seat and you're not going to do anything with your engineering degree, Yep. So there was that targeted microaggression. And there was also this general discomfort toward people who weren't part of the majority in many different ways. So that was a bit of an awakening. But that also became a great exercise for me in building social capital. So I made attempts to learn the language, build relationships, understand people, and what is behind the perceptions that people hold. So that also became like a foundation for my career journey as well. And then, of course, I came to the US. So that's another great training ground, the whole immigrant experience. So those early experiences certainly shaped me. And you asked about people, I would say it would have to be my parents. You know, our family left India for England before my first birthday. My dad was doing his PhD there. And I think it would have taken enormous courage for my parents to take this risk, commit to facing challenges head on. They must have had immense confidence in their abilities to overcome these challenges. You know, as my father navigated graduate school in a foreign country, working long hours, my mother taught herself to be conversant in English. And I know that this immigrant experience gave my parents a broader perspective and an ability to see things differently. So once we returned to India a few years later, I know it was reflected in their thinking, in our upbringing. It was clear that we were to work hard. We were to make the best of any opportunity, with the recognition that stepping outside of the comfort zone would require resilience and was essential to growth and success.
So much of what you say resonates with me as well. You know, growing up with, I think, folks who didn't speak my language for, I think, almost all of my life till, university. That really shapes us in so many ways. So you went from not being the science type to now being the chief science advocate. That's quite a journey. So how did that come about?
And I didn't think of myself as what I thought was the science and engineering type. You know, I wasn't the one, tinkering with toys or toying with tools when I was a young girl. I was very curious, but it was not about things. It was about people. And I wanted to help people. I wanted to improve lives, make the world a better place. And as a child, I could not see the human impact of STEM roles. Right. And I have to say, I never encountered a single woman engineer while growing up.
Oh, my goodness.
And I did not associate engineering with my mindset. So it was no surprise that I was gravitating to other fields. And in looking back, it was probably more of humanities and social sciences. But I continued on, with my journey. And then I landed in the US for graduate school. And here is when I thought, is this what I want to be doing?
Right.
And is this the decision that is going to now shape my life? And what happened to that child who wanted to help people improve lives? And I just could not build that context around the science I was doing. And it didn't feel good. I had this sort of cognitive dissonance. I just thought I got to do something different. So I switched my areas of doctoral research. And I ended up in a project where I could give it a more human context. And that really lit a fire under me. So I realized that the context is important. And, stripping STEM subjects from our human context is not doing a great service to the very subject, especially as it relates to women and minorities. And I ended up at 3M. I'm so lucky that I did a summer internship there. So my path ended up there. And I just decided I will work on any area, even if I know nothing about it, because I need to feel that inspiration. I know I need to work on something that matters to me. I'm using my skills and talents and abilities to make a difference. And that's what I did. And I rose up the ladder. And then one day I got a call to become the chief science advocate. And I was like, I'm not sure I can do this, because I need to let you know, I didn't think of myself as the science and engineering type. I did not secure admission to top colleges. I came in through as a summer intern. And I don't have a specific expertise. I just chase problems that inspire me. And then, of course, I also wondered, why do we need to advocate for science? So I found out that 3M commissioned the survey to understand the global public perception. And 4 out of 10 said that if science didn't exist, their lives would be no different.
Oh, my God, that's unimaginable.
And get this, they were taking the survey on their laptops and mobile phones. So you know what the problem is, science is invisible, science is underappreciated, science is taken for granted. But in my head, it was like, see, I told you that context is important, because people don't understand that the gadgets they love and the devices they can't live without and the gizmos they use, these are applications of science. And in many cases, decades of scientific research. People don't have the context. And I know from my journey how important that context was to me. And then I later also found out, Shahana, how important that context was as a mother, seeing my daughter only asking for the context and my son being sufficiently motivated with the content. So I realized that, this is a problem. And I knew that for someone who felt lost and someone who didn't think that they were the science type, I got to the highest level a scientist can attain. I have 79 patents to my name. I've been awarded a lot of things. And I was like, I need people to think about what I think about every day. How many students like me? How many scientists like me? How many ideas and how many innovations are we missing out on? So yes, we need to advocate to change that. So I said yes to this role. And we care about science at 3M. We know there's a negative public perception. If the public doesn't have a positive perception of science and has a negative perception, then it's going to impact everybody. So that's why I accepted the role, and, it was announced, and I got to share the results of our global survey with the world and foster a conversation around it.
There's so many lessons in what you said, Jayshree. The first certainly is the whole over-indexing on content and under-indexing on context really makes it unrelatable for many of us who are context seekers. And I certainly can relate it to my own experience. I studied trigonometry. I can't tell you one concept that I learned in my 3 years. It's because there was no context whatsoever. It was all content. We forget how to humanize science for people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And you are certainly doing a fabulous job. And I think the second part of what you said is that it's not just the context, but it's also being able to connect the dots, right? To make that connection from what you are doing to the impact it has. Just like in organizations, when you see the impact of your work, when you see it, impacting patients and customers, you have a very different appreciation for what it takes to actually deliver that. Being an advocate for science and championing diversity in science seems really close to your heart. Seems aligned to your purpose, seems almost like a calling. So why is it so important for you to be the champion for science?
There is no denying the world requires innovation. Innovation needs science. Science demands diversity, and diversity warrants equity. I mean, again and again, we have seen what can happen if we don't bring the public along. And what can happen if the science community does not reflect the community at large. And so that's why we have to have these diverse perspectives, because another thing that will significantly suffer is innovation. And we need to crack the code to a sustainable future, and we need everybody, every diverse perspective we can get to do it. So I think it's a matter of our survival. So I think we have to be very careful. Otherwise, science will be rejected, technology will not be trusted, products will be obsoleted, and companies will be obliterated. Yeah. So it is important to advocate for science. It is important to advocate for diversity in science. And it is important to advocate for a human and societal context in science.
What's really interesting in what you're saying is you have an empathy for skeptics that comes through in how you talk about championing for science. And I think sometimes we take the approach of talking at people, trying to convince them that what we are saying is right. It's so obvious. Why wouldn't you just, agree? But like you said, and, going by the stats from your survey, that's not exactly an approach that works. There is much more of a need for empathy to understand what their situation is and how to make it more relatable. So instead of asking, why are they not getting it? You're asking yourself, how can I help communicate this in a way that can help someone understand what it is that science can help them in their daily lives with, which I think is such a refreshing approach, such a refreshing take on the subject. If science in the world was out there looking for an advocate, I have no doubt it would be you.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about 3M, right? It is such an iconic, innovative company. Its 15% rule is legendary and honestly has been the envy of, I think, every organization and employee for decades. So talk a little bit about, starting your career as a young scientist and perhaps even now, how that has impacted your journey and growth.
3M has what we call 15% culture, which essentially means that employees can spend 15% of their time on any project of their choosing that will help 3M. Because some of us will always do what we want to do, but for the rest, it does give a sense of empowerment in case you're tentative.
Right.
So that's really the genius of this 15% culture. It creates an expectation that you can be innovative. And it has played an absolutely critical role in my career and my career success. I have pretty much worked on 15% projects in my 30 years at 3M.
Right. Oh,
And
amazing.
these are the things that I came up with, I scouted, then I worked on it, and then they became real projects, and many, many, many examples of that. The whole idea that I'm going to talk about working on something and inspire others to work with me to, it just forces you to be curious about what that business cares about. Is it too difficult a problem to solve? So it just makes you so much curious, and it forces you to develop a compelling proposition around your idea, because you aren't the one who is going to be able to implement it. You're going to have to make, an entire network sort of inspired to work on it. So it helps you reach out to others, convince them that this is a great thing to work on their 15% time. So it teaches you how to, sort of influence and inspire others. So that then it automatically builds your network. It builds your network, not just in your group, but in other areas. It sort of stamps you as somebody who can be strategic and can think of things to work on that are non-obvious. It forces you to bolster connection with other technologies that you may necessarily not be working on. So many different benefits that come from it.
A lot of people have ideas, right? But those ideas often die at idea stage because it is so hard to advocate for your idea, to convince people to join the cause or to get funding for it. So talk a little bit about maybe what that journey was like for you. And if you have a story to share, that would be great as well.
Everybody wants to be moved by stories. So what I do is basically 3 questions that we have to answer. First is, why this? Why now? Second, what's in it for me from their perspective? Like, okay, another idea, Jayshree, and I've got 30,000 things to work on. What's in it for me? And then the third is the what if. And so the first one is inform. Second one I think of as influence. And the third one is the inspire. And they play a critical role in pulling a compelling story. Why this? Why now helps to set the stage of the reasoning, by asking the questions behind each why. What's in it for me helps with that change resistance. And once you have the what, so what covered, the what if question can spark that innovative thinking, and you can paint a future vision of the win, So if you use these 3, I think you can make them see the possibilities, not just the product concept at hand. You can make them see the trends, not just the current status of the technology. You can make them see the commitment to the market, not just a single customer. And you can make them see the passionate people, not just some process to churn the innovation. So I like to say we have to be really wise about our whys.
Oh, that's brilliant. Very well said.
This podcast is brought to you by Just Human. We offer a broad range of leadership development solutions, including mindful leadership workshops and executive coaching. To learn more, visit us at justhuman.io. And now, back to the podcast.
You have so much wisdom, and I'm so glad that you found a way to share that wisdom through your 2 books, which are about the heart of science. So tell us a little bit about what drove you to write those books and what were you hoping to achieve with that?
It was a tough time in 2020. That's an understatement, right?
Right.
And I really struggled when the raw and revealing events that happened over Memorial Day weekend, right in our backyard in Minneapolis. I'm talking about the George Floyd killing. I should have been more aware of the systemic aspect of this, and I just wasn't. And so I, read a lot of books and watched all the documentaries and tried to really understand something that I should have known more as a highly privileged, South Asian immigrant. And then it was like, I need to do something. And so I just put all my essays, and I approached Society of Women Engineers, and they were just excited about the idea. So we put it together in the Heart of Science Engineering: Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints. And all the proceeds go to a scholarship for underrepresented women in STEM. And then I actually got to meet the first scholar, and I was like, I can't stop there. So I wrote my second book. So the first book in that series is a collection of essays on big picture topics, from my experiences as an engineer, a parent, a science advocate, a thought leader. And I cover themes, like STEM advocacy, convergence of STEM and humanities, which I think is very important, leading from my own rung of the ladder, developing a growth context. And then what is at the heart of my second book, Engineering Fine Print, is an attempt to go deeper on the topic of transitions to thrive and survive amidst change, reflections to provide perspective, and insights into actions we can all take. And what's the best part is that enough people joined the cause. What I mean is enough people bought the books that we now have a second student. Wow. And this one is pursuing biomedical at Johns Hopkins. And it's a win-win. It is all for a good cause. It is the best gift you can give anyone. It's the gift of education. And that's what I wanted to do through this.
That's truly remarkable, Jayshree. We started the Mindful Leadership podcast to showcase stories of leaders who live their authentic leadership by connecting who they are with how they lead and translating their purpose into everyday actions. And you truly exemplify that. And what you just shared about the book, not just the book, but also the way you advocate for science, it truly exemplifies what we call mindful leadership. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We talk a lot about innovation, but we talk about innovation as a virtuous cycle, right? We see innovation leading to success, and that's kind of all we notice for a while. But the fact is, failure is such a critical part of innovation too. So I'd love to ask you this difficult question. When you think of your, career and all of the success that you've had, what is the one failure perhaps that you're most proud of?
I just have trouble calling anything a sort of failure, because if you learn something, it's really not a failure. So I am proud of everything that we have worked on, whether it was a technical success or a business success, or even if it didn't deliver, because I believe it was a necessary part of the journey. In fact, there was one project, I worked on it for almost 3 years. 3 years, and we had nothing to show for it from a business result. But it really created so many technology building blocks that helped others. And so I know it'll happen every time I enter a new area. I know we will have failures and struggles and pushback, and we'll have to be in the long game. And I have to say that, in fact, some of the things that many people in the company are working on now are ideas that some of us had and pushed over a decade ago. So sometimes it takes moving the needle to move mountains. We moved the needle, and today it is helping to move mountains. And there will be many reasons why some things may not be successful. It could be, I've had all of these happen. The strategy at the customer changed. We couldn't scale it up in manufacturing due to some constraint. The product placement or the pricing wasn't right in the portfolio, and we couldn't sell enough. Things changed in the marketplace. But as long as the building blocks that you created of information, of technology, of experiments can be communicated and people can learn from it, I think it's a success. And I communicate with stakeholders often. I'm very transparent about where we are, how we are progressing, issues that we are having, and if they have any suggestions.
Beautifully said. An organization has to learn. And you can't learn without actually failing at something and, understanding what happened and why. So beautifully said. I also really appreciate the lesson that it's not about focusing on the failure, but it's about ensuring that the learnings from it are not just for your individual benefit, but for the collective benefit that helps the organization overall learn and grow as well.
Yes, because that helps remove the stigma. Oh, we don't want to talk about Project XYZ. Why not? I want to know why it failed so that all of us don't go there. Or if we go there with eyes open, or we look at the assumptions and understand what are the assumptions that change. So good leaders know this. The not so good leaders will be like, shh, don't talk about it because it happened during their tenure.
Right.
Good leaders know that we need to talk about it and talk about what we learned so that the next person coming in that leadership role is also aware of the lessons that were learned.
And ideas are rarely fully formed at birth, right? I mean, they have to evolve, and there's a journey that, needs to happen. When we talk about leaders, the first thing that comes to mind is really somebody managing a team. But that's not really true, right? Because individual contributors are leaders too. And your career certainly exemplifies the fact that the philosophy of leading from any seat. And so, talk a little bit about what that journey was like for you. When did that shift happen where you sort of realized the kind of leader you wanted to be?
Yeah, I never thought of myself as, wanting to have any kind of big quote unquote leadership role. I was doing my business, my lab stuff, and I got tapped on the shoulder for an opportunity for 2 years to sort of be part of teaching product development and technology development methodology. And I was like, heck no. I know what I do every day. I know what I need to do the next day. I know I can sleep well knowing that I did an experiment and I looked at the data and all of that. What you're telling me is that for 2 years, I will not have anything, no experiments that I will be doing. How am I going to sleep? And what do these people do? Well, they're going to influence. I'm like, explain to me again what that means. And how do you sleep? Like, how do you influence people and say, oh, I influence somebody and sleep at night? So honestly speaking, I had absolutely no idea what that was. And fortunately, I was pushed really hard to take that role by a brilliant leader who knew that I would be a good person for that role. And when I got that role and I started to talk about product development methodology, I realized I can bring my own experiences into it and teach it that way. And soon enough, people were signing up to be in my class because the way I talked about it was very real. I wasn't going to talk from some PowerPoints and some buzzwords and I made it real. It's like, this is how you do it. And I slowly realized that in that position, I am influencing because you are collecting thoughts, you are planting a seed, you are making more people remember how you think and how you suggest that they should think. And that's influence. And after that tenure was over, everybody who did that role went into management because it was a training grounds for management. Because you got to learn how to influence, you taught the methodology across, you understand the methodology, and you work with all these people, you were interacting with senior people and all of that. I was the first person, Shahana, who said, no thanks. And it was very, very difficult for people to accept that no, because they thought I would be perfect for it, not because of any other thing, but the fact that I didn't have a single expertise. I was going from area to area to area solving problems. How am I ever going to rise up on the technical ladder because I don't have that expertise in that one area? But I realized I want to influence from a technical role because I can also see sometimes there are a lot of pressures on the so-called leaders to sort of toe the party line. And a lot of people don't bring their courage along with them.
Right.
And I realized that I have a very unique voice, that if I stay authentic to my voice, I could perhaps, in the wonderful culture of 3M, be able to influence just as much, and if not more, from my own rung of the ladder. And that's what is the realization that happened. And it only happened because I opened up my mind to an experience that I was completely close to. I did not want to do this role, but when I did it, I realized, oh my gosh, this is how you influence people. And to this day, Shana, I kid you not, I have people who come to me and say, I was in your class. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you remember? because that's when I realized you can influence. And it is all about bringing your authenticity, bringing your experiences, and really storytelling the simple concepts that hit home with context.
There's so much in what you said, there's so much to unpack. But I think it's really interesting because in a lot of places, right, when we create roles, it's like creating a box with very hard lines of what the role is and what it does. But I think the first is the fact that 3M has the 15% rule. It lets you open up your box a little bit because it lets you be curious about the world in a different way and shows you that you can impact way outside of what's traditionally your role. And what you're talking about leadership is taking it even one step further than that, or significantly further than that, which is about saying that you can have much broader impact no matter what your role is, because everybody has an idea of how the world could be better.
Yeah.
Right? How your organization could be better, how your team could function better. And it's really about sort of giving those ideas some oxygen.
Yes. And I think people get so, and I did too, you get so tied into certain ideas or concepts. But what I say is the central idea you need to focus all your energies on is taking initiative. 30 years, and I can look back and say the only thing that I have had going for me is that I definitely have a very strong sense of initiative. And I do it without waiting for immediate results. It's not about them. It's about me taking initiative. I hold that expectation of myself to take initiative.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about, the manager who saw potential in you when you didn't know you had it, right? In terms of the previous role that you went to. So could you talk perhaps a little more about a mentor or a sponsor that you've had in your career and how they have impacted your growth journey?
I've had a mentor, a formal mentor, only once in my 30 years, for 1 year through an executive mentoring program where they paired executives with employees. And in fact, that particular mentor was the one who said I should consider this role of higher influence. But I also think what I've had is what I call menteeship. Mentorship is great, don't get me wrong. But so are relationships, partnerships, friendships. And at the end of the day, no one mentor is responsible for your success. That will lie squarely with you. But what I have found is that what is more important is have menteeship. And what I mean by that is the ability to learn. You can learn from anybody. And believe me, it is a skill. It's not a talent. It's a skill we can all develop. So if you want a mentor, develop menteeship and start listening, observing from those around you. Finding people around you who have the contextual understanding of who you are is way more important than finding that one mentor that you meet once in a quarter. So don't freak out if you don't have mentorship. Make sure you have menteeship because that is under your control. And that's exactly how this happened when I got this role, because it was my boss's boss who said, how about Jayshree for that role? I've never had a mentorship relationship with him, but he saw how I operate and all the communication that I did about what we were doing, where we were going, why we were doing it.
I think that is such a powerful idea, Jayshree. We all have limiting beliefs, right, that hold us back. And, we have to sort of go through this struggle of overcoming them in order to learn and grow and make progress in our lives. Do you have a limiting belief that's, ever held you back? And how have you, tackled it or, got past it?
Honestly, I can still attest to the feeling of anxiety every time I embark on a new endeavor. The strangest thing is most of these endeavors are in fact initiated by me. And yet I feel this lack of, self-assuredness, and I'm very transparent about it. And I say, don't misconstrue it as lack of confidence, On the contrary, I say this feeling fuels me to gain enough knowledge, to reduce anxiety, be extremely well prepared to handle the challenges. So with age and experience, I have discovered that is my virtuous cycle. I have to take action. That action gives me success, and that success gives me confidence. And I take the next action, and it'll be bigger this time. It'll give me success that I took the action, not the outcome. I'm not tied to the outcome, but the fact that I took action. And then that gives me confidence. So it's very freeing once you know that you're gonna feel the anxiety and it's okay, and you know how to address that. So I don't get trapped in the vicious cycle of overthinking and self-doubt and paralysis.
That's such a powerful lesson, because the greatest challenge of self-doubt, insecurities, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, right? Lack of self-assuredness, is the fact that, do you live in the self-doubt, or can you channel that into positive action, right? That's what differentiates whether you can really get past it, whether you can, use that as fuel for your growth. And you certainly had some reservations before you took the chief science advocate role, right? So talk a little bit about how you, help yourself through that quandary.
Well, I just had to think about, why am I doing it? And I reframed it back to, I am doing it because I want to make it better for others like me. And I'm finding that there are many, many, many like me who will not be excited about STEM fields because they don't see the context. After becoming a mother, I realized that context was so important for my daughter. So I kind of connected it with the gender thing. And then I went and actually dug into social science research, and I found it is absolutely true. It's called communal goal incongruity. I tried to find out who said it, who came up with it, and I cold called this professor. And to make a long story short, we actually funded research with her that is now complete, and we have submitted our manuscript.
Wow.
Because I was going to dig deep into that. You knew it. And I was able to convince our management to actually fund that research, because that puts science behind our science advocacy, which we are so passionate about. So we tried to understand how to increase sense of belonging for STEM students who are from underrepresented communities.
Wow. That is amazing, Jayshree.
It is.
If there was ever a full circle moment, this is it, right?
Yes.
So many more questions for you. So we tried to put a couple of them in a quick rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Well, okay. So less words, Jayshree, less words.
If your life was made into a movie, what would be the title and what would be your theme song?
Oh, I don't have to think too much about it at all. We do have a movie. Funny that you ask. It's 8 minutes long, and it's part of a 3M docuseries, and it captures my journey. Actually, right here is the movie, not the science type.
Right.
And the theme song is actually called Tameless, which I love. And it's a great movie. We created it to inform, influence, and inspire the next generation. We wanted to show that it doesn't matter what your age, race, gender, or ethnicity is. Bring that diversity, because science needs you to be.
Yeah. Actor, poet, music producer, author, and TEDx speaker and scientist. I mean, it's rare that all those come at the same time in anybody's bio. So that's amazing, Jayshree. Well, what's a book that's been life-changing for you?
The book I read in 2020, when the George Floyd killing happened, and I was really trying to figure out what is my role in this as an immigrant. It's Dolly Chug's book. It's called The Person You Mean to Be. And she makes the case that being an ally really isn't about being a good person. It's about constantly striving to be a better person.
Right. You're in a room full of science skeptics. What do you say?
You don't say much. You listen.
Oh, love it.
Because science has been ripped off of the context many times, and listening to them will give you much needed context that can help us. So shut up and listen.
Brilliant, brilliant. You're in a room full of young girls looking up at you. What do you say?
You want to help people? You want to improve lives? You want to make the world a better place? Science is for you.
Brilliant. What is one piece of career advice that's helped you in your career, Jayshree? And what's one piece of career advice that you would share with our listeners today?
Yeah, the best piece of advice I got was make the best decision for you for now. Just that addition of the for now was so liberating. That is something that I really, really make the best decision for you for now, because there's a whole career ahead of you, whole life ahead of you. Everything changes. Lots of things happen. You change, you evolve. Just remember that. And if I was to give a piece of advice, I would say do good work and talk about it.
Perfect. This has been so much fun, Jayshree. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom with our listeners today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear from you. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Mindful Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Just Human. We are a growth accelerator for our clients, helping your people and businesses thrive through human-centered, ecosystem-based people solutions. To learn more, visit us at justhuman.io and schedule a 30-minute free call with us.